For more than a century, the nation-state, a political idea that began in Europe, has shaped how we organize the world. For some, it offers a sense of unity, security, and shared purpose. For others, it divides more than it connects. In this Doha Debates Town Hall, in partnership with the Bradford Literature Festival, we're asking, where does national belonging really come from? Is it rooted in shared culture and history? Is it defined by citizenship? Or is it something deeper, beyond the nation entirely? At a time when borders are contested, identities are layered, and loyalties are put to the test, we're exploring whether the nation-state is still a meaningful foundation of who we are. And if not, what could come next? On stage with us, we have three guests who see this issue very differently.
The nation-state is the basis on which the world has been organized for the last couple of hundred years, particularly this last century. And to my mind, any alternative is likely to be worse.
I'm in love with the European civilization, and this is something I really love, that I like to defend. The real future of the nation-state relies in the cooperation with other nation-states and the formation of large civilizational groups.
My answer to the viability of the modern state is in the negative. The state has to be renegotiated in terms of the commands and the imperatives of ethics. But if we don't go that path, we can see what's happening just in the last 5 years. We're doomed.
Also with us, a group of university students and young adults who join us from Qatar, the UK, and other parts of the world. They're all coming from different perspectives.
I kind of struggle to define myself. I'm Indian by passport, but I'm pretty American by pedigree.
We're supposed to be treating people who are coming from different communities to know each other rather than vilifying or doing the othering thing with them.
I'm glad that we have that space to tell our stories and relate it to broader problems that we have today.
And today, we'll engage in a challenging yet respectful Majlis-style debate centered around truth-seeking. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is the Doha Debates Town Hall. I'm excited, and I can feel the excitement on this stage. A warm welcome to you all. So let's just jump right in. I'd like to begin by taking the pulse of our on-stage audience here. Will, I'm going to start with you. Welcome, Will. You are from the UK. Do you feel like you truly belong to this country that you call home?
I think day by day it changes. One of the best things about this country in the last few decades has been the multicultural experiment, where on your street you can see people from all walks of life, from different perspectives, different value systems. And an amazing thing happens when people from different perspectives come together, when there is an ability of a deep human emotion to connect. And I think, unfortunately, around the world, and in the UK is no different, there's been a tendency for people to abuse structures and institutions to prevent us from connecting with one another and denying humans of an ability to be empathetic to one another. And I hope that in the course of this debate, we'll be able to connect with people, understand each other's points of views, and deeply connect rather than to push people away.
Well, as you're saying that, I can already see people's heads nodding, so I think that's a good sign. Reem, what about you? You are from Qatar. What makes you feel like you belong to that country?
Well, to be a Qatari is like something to be proud of. We as Qataris, we feel more a sense of belonging through the common beliefs that we have, having the same religion, and the languages we share. So me being able to relate to other people in my country is something that how I feel like this is a place where I belong to and I can stay. I always have a home there.
Let's go to the other side of the stage. Hannah, what about you? Is there a place that you feel most at home that you call home? and why?
So I do not think there's a place that I think the whole earth is my home. I believe so. I believe home transcends borders because I believe we all are essentially ethical and moral in our own true selves. But we just need some help getting there. And whether I feel belonging to India or not, I would say a quite crisp no, because as a Muslim, as that's very obvious, I feel like the state has stripped me of my agency. And I think we would love to explore, I would love to explore how we could be a universal, how we could think about a universal moral order and work towards that.
Guess we've been served some interesting food for thought here. Dr. Tharoor, I want to go to you because I saw as Hannah was talking, there was maybe a smile of recognition. I don't know. You have to tell me what was behind that smile, but there was a head nod. What were you thinking?
There were two that I particularly wanted to react to. There was Will talking about the multiculturalism of Britain. That in some ways is so amusing because when the British were an empire and they ruled people from all over the globe, those people were made to feel subjects and never equals or citizens. I remember an anecdote by a British writer as late as the 1940s, where he sat on a plane, there weren't too many planes in those days, next to a large, impressive black gentleman, and he asked him, which country in Africa are you from? And the man looked at him and said, moi, je suis français. Now, no British subject of any British colony who wasn't white, British and Christian would have been able to say, I'm British in those days. Today, there's been a dramatic change, and it shows in many ways how the world has evolved and Britain has changed. And then I was reacting to my young compatriot here who mentioned she's from India, and her loyalty question. That troubles me. I'm sad about that because my entire notion of Indianness is one where no one should feel excluded on the grounds of religion, nationality, ethnicity, language, or region, because the entire idea of India as a state is one that incorporates all of these. So if you've been made to feel that way, I'm very sorry. It shouldn't have happened. But, as recently as our most recent clash with Pakistan, it was rather pointedly, the daily Indian briefings were given by two women officers, one of whom was a Muslim woman. So the whole idea was that India was projecting precisely its own diversity, and this wasn't about India, Pakistan, or Hindu-Muslim, it was about India versus terrorism. So there's always been in India the sense that everyone is equal, everyone should belong.
A sense. So we're going to unpack whether or not that's a reality, but I want to broaden this out a little bit because, Dr. Engels, we started with some real personal talks of home identity, where that is. I wonder for you, when you think about your own nation, is it identity mainly based on a shared history and traditions, or is it a commitment to shared civic values? I'm thinking democracy, I'm thinking individual rights. How do you define that for yourself?
I'm not always sure if I'm really the right person to be on this plateau, as I'm a Belgian. So speaking about nation state as being a Belgian is not very easy because we don't have a nation state. So when you also ask this question, do you feel at home? It's very complicated also for me to respond to that. I would say that, of course, I feel a human being and I really like sharing all that the different civilizations have to teach to us. But I think that my main identity would probably be that of a European. I feel deeply European. I feel deeply committed to the different facets of our European civilization. I could describe or could even say that from a certain perspective I'm deeply in love with the beauty of that civilization. That doesn't exclude, of course, all the horrors that are also linked to our history as to the history of all the other civilizations. But still, this is for me a very strong identity because I don't have a national identity. Being a Belgian, well, we don't have a shared language. We used to have a shared Catholic religion, but that has also disappeared. All these ethnic tentatives to identify or to define identity doesn't really function in Belgium also. So this national level is very difficult to explain.
Dr. Engels, for generosity purposes, how would you define a nation state for those who aren't in the know? What is that definition to you?
Well, a definition in the past, if you read, for example, the Greeks, if you read what Herodotus had to say about the nation state, he would say it is a community of a common ethnos, so the genetic family clan makeup of a common religion, of a common language, and of common customs. That is the full package of that. Of course, there are not many European nation states who even fit that criteria, these different criteria. But basically, this is the idea that was behind that. There's a commonality of language, of descent, of common history, you could say, of religion, of customs. And for some nation state that works. Like for Poland, that works. For Czechia or Slovakia or Hungary, that works. For Germany, a bit less, as there are other German-speaking nation states. For France also a bit less. But that's the general idea. But to a certain point
it's not the only idea, right, David? It's not the only idea of the nation state. There is the idea of civic nationalism, which rests on a constitution, institutions for a common territory, and does not require a common ethnicity, common religion, common language. And that's what the Indian nationalism idea is. That's the American nationalism idea too, in many ways.
That's what in the late 18th and then in the 19th century then became the juridical framework that tried to define the nation, because these other definitions became more and more fuzzy, because religion was less and less important, ethnicity seemed also a bit dubious, while language and customs still were there. But that is what we placed then step by step nation state, and introduced into that, of course, also a criteria of a certain generality that then explains why these nations are less and less properly defined, because they go back to a legalist approach and not anymore a cultural approach, could say.
Dr. Hallaq, I want to bring you in here. You heard about the commonalities. Should our identity be anchored in those commonalities, or do we need to throw it all out, abandon this idea of identities based on nation, and look beyond our borders?
Well, let me begin by saying that I'm a Palestinian, so I have no state. I have never known what a state that I belong to means. And I believe probably because of this, I've been, fortuitously or not, been positioned in a way that I am a critic of the whole idea, and I look at it totally differently. First, you ask for a definition. The nation state is a modern entity that starts after the 1600, specifically after 1650, that managed to cultivate the power, enough power to declare itself for the first time in human history as sovereign. Sovereignty means that it has the power over life and death. In other words, the first thing we need to know about the modern nation state is not that it has this mythical homogeneity of there's no homogeneity anywhere, especially nowadays. But it never existed actually in history. If you are a good historian, you know that people are mixed from different. There is no such thing as nation, really. Nation is an invention of the modern state in order to subjugate its citizens into believing that they are exactly what we are hearing today here. Actually, the discourse for the civility or the civicness of the modern state is precisely what the modern state wants you to believe. So this is the first thing. So I would think that we need to look at it analytically. First, history is extremely important. To study European history from the 14th, 15th century onwards is an extremely important. If you want to understand what the state is, you need to start there. And then you discover that around 1650, things begin to come to the surface. They have already been baking before, but 1650 things become to the surface. There is something of a kind of a state that emerges that has not been known before in history. Now, the thing about this, which is very central to the whole idea, is that states, that state of the 1650 on, had some commonality with what we call government. Now, we shouldn't be confusing governing or government with state. Every complex society had a government, from China to India to the Muslim world, everywhere. But not a single one of them had a state. A state is an exclusive European production. And so that is a crucial fact. And when it develops this idea of sovereignty, it also decided that actually we are going to be producing the nation it is an invention. The nation is an invention. It's not a real thing. There is no such thing as Indian nation. There is no such thing as even a Palestinian nation, which is actually much less heterogeneous than the Indian.
But when you say you're a Palestinian, what do you mean? What happens when a Palestinian state is
I mean
created?
that I have been persecuted into exile and have been oppressed all my life since I opened my eyes to the world. That's what it means to be a Palestinian to me.
If their state is created for the people of Palestine.
The proof of the power of the state that's creating us, even it creates me as at the same time when I'm resisting it. I am reacting to the state, and therefore it's creating my. So we are facing a situation where we need to understand what's happening to us first. We do not know who we are today. That's our fundamental problem, is that we do not know. We don't have the diagnosis of who we are today truly. Everybody is speaking about things from the here and now, but nobody sees the situation from a different perspective from the outside. And then once you look at the nation state from the outside, you actually realize how pathological our political and social lives have been. Because we as a society, so there was no society before the modern state either. Why? Because the state created society as well.
If I may, I would perhaps add two elements to that, because indeed the nation, as has often been stated, is a result of the nation state, basically. The nation is a creation of the nation state. Look, for example, at France. It is very, very clearly that it is absolutism, and then especially the French Revolution, that creates not only a nation state, but also the nation that goes with it. So there is an aspect of artificiality. But the result is there. Even if it is an invention, the result is there. For example, if you look at France, previously, half a millennium ago, you had so many regional traditions. You had languages like Breton, and you have the Occitania, and so on. Yeah. And all that has been more or less eradicated by the creation of the nation state. But the result that by now we have this state that is very homogeneous and where indeed everyone by now speaks French, the result is the same. So the result is real. Even if we have an invention, the nation has been created. So we need, of course, to deal with the fact that whatever are the reasons of that, the result is tangible.
May I also just react to both Wael and David?
Please react, and then I want to bring in our onstage audience.
Wael, if tomorrow a Palestinian state is created, as so many are seeking, and you become a citizen of a Palestinian state, will that identity not have meaning for you? Can you really say this is a concept without meaning? Before you answer, just on the civilization state idea, doesn't it depend to a very great extent on how you define that civilization? I would define Indian civilization as starting from 3,000, 4,000 years ago with an ancient recorded history, but which has since been infused into it various waves of influences from different languages, religions, cultural, ethnic groups that have all come in and assimilated, and they've all gone in, whether it's Islam, whether it's 2 centuries of British colonial rule, whether it's Christianity, whether it's refugees from different parts. All of that's also part of our civilization. So in that sense, I'm happy to accept. But if we start talking about civilization in an exclusive way, excluding, for example, anything that's not going back to the original civilizational concept, then we have a problem. And that, too, I think, is part of the debate about a civilization state in Europe today and perhaps in India as well.
I would, if I may, start again with David and come to you, Shashi. I would say that actually it is on principle wrong to use the word state for a political entities that existed before the 16th century anywhere in the world. First, they didn't call themselves states. Second, they don't qualify, and we cannot even, when we analyze them, including the empires that you study, they did not operate by I have studied also the empire of Islam for 40 years, and it operated by totally different logic, never was called a state, never even talked the same language, political language as we use today. The modern state is the unique thing. That's why when people talk about two-state solution for the Palestinians, I actually say don't want a Palestinian state that is like any other state. In fact, I was thinking of beginning creating an idea for a Palestinian state might be slightly idealistic, but I think in the long run, I'm convinced it is achievable. Where in fact it does not succumb to the model of the modern state, because the modern state is not designed to improve what we call, or to create a human flourishing. Human flourishing is antithetical to the state. The state, in fact, is this is when I heard your remark, Will, about not feeling whole here, and that you feel that there is this kind of, the people who come to the UK give you a sense of community. That's precisely what the nation state does. It wants to create the nation, which is a political entity that can be sent to war, that can produce good economy, robust production of material wealth, etc. But it doesn't want anything that resembles a community, because once you start creating a community, you begin to develop loyalty for the community, which competes with the loyalty for the state. That's why all the states went after their own populations. For example, if you look at Libya, Egypt, and Israel, the three of them went after their Bedouin populations to settle them. What's wrong with Bedouin life? I wish I was born a Bedouin, because it is so much fun to be moving all the time. But they settled them, they forced them to have schools, to be educated, to create what? To create them as citizens. Meaning what? Separate individuals. That's why we are all individualistic today. That's why we are living in our bubbles. The community is dissolving. Even in the Muslim world, it is going down the drain slowly.
Dr. Hallaq, I feel like
I'm sorry.
No, don't say sorry. This is wonderful, and I feel like you're preaching to the choir. So I want the reactions I see on their face to come out via speaking. So a show of hands, John. Though I saw you nodding. I really want to know what you're thinking. Go ahead, John.
Yes, I was particularly moved by the story of Dr. Hallaq as an exile, and I related to myself as a Filipino who's mostly lived in the diaspora and never knows where home is, because I've been estranged from my homeland for such a long time. And I've been imposed like particular definitions of what it means to be a Filipino, which I find completely toxic and completely alienates myself from them. But I wanted to ask Dr. Hallaq, since he made the nomadic Bedouin remark, right? Do you think it's better that individuals should live a life of exile or liminality?
As what they say, if you want to make an omelet, you have to crack an egg. It's something, and when it's impossible without it. So when you are in exile, already, then you become that kind of intellectual who sits outside of systems. As I said, I don't know what it means to some of my friends tell me, I want to go back to Germany. I want to go back to the Philippines. I want to go back to Indonesia, because this is my country. I never understood what that meant. And so from that perspective, I lost a lot, because I am a refugee in many ways and uprooted. But at the same time, I gained the critical edge in a sense. But that is the payoff, perhaps, of this. But not everybody is a critic. Not everybody is. To be outside of the community was, before the 19th century, for many people around the world, a sentence of death. Just to be taken out of a tribe or out of a big family, it was a sentence of death. This is why the idea of exile came up as a punishment. Exile is a punishment. Why? Because originally, it's now if you exile somebody, you'll say, oh, that's fine, I'll go tour another country. But in the old days, exile meaning literally snatching them out of their family, and that killed them sometimes. They prefer to die rather than be alienated and roaming around the world. I think the entire idea of nationalism and the birth of the raison d'etat. The raison d'etat is reason of state in English. It doesn't sound good. The raison d'etat much better, not because it's French, because it expresses certain particular notion of the state having its own reason to exist. That's why the state is the only thing on this earth that is self-justifying. Not just justifying. It doesn't have to explain why it is there. And who is the other entity in the world that doesn't have to explain himself or herself? Is God. What the raison d'etat is in fact the abdication or the abduction rather of God's power by the state. when the 17th century states, 18th century in particular, declared itself to be sovereign, meaning that it decides anything it wants without even giving a reason, its own reason is good enough. And you know the reasons that the state can come up with, as we see on the news every second day. That is when the moment when the state said, "I am God now." And Nietzsche got it very well. He said it's a God. Many people call it the God on earth.
Das kälteste aller Ungeheuer, as Nietzsche said. The
Exactly.
coldest of all monsters.
Exactly. The point here is that we cannot escape the translation.
Look at the faces on the stage. There are so many things this conversation has sparked. So I'm going to go a few at a time. Mohammed, Anjali, and Natalie. And then Suleiman will come to you. So go ahead.
So I do want to go back to what Dr. Tharoor was saying about we belong to the state and the state belongs to us, and saying that the nation state did develop into, beyond ethnicity and religion and all these kind of things. But at the same time, you also said that India enshrines civic rights in the constitution. However, people like Hana and Muslims in India do not feel like they are part of the state. They feel excluded. So my question is, who does our patriotism and nationalism serve here? Because when India needed people like Hana, Muslims against Pakistan, they were there for India. But is India there for the people, for the Muslims inside that country? So is the nation state a viable solution still? Because I don't see it developing beyond ethnicity and religion and all these kind of things.
What's the alternative? I mean, I spent 29 years in the UN defending the sovereignty of nation states because that actually was, it seemed to everybody, the most efficient as well as the most sensible way of organizing human beings in entities or units of governance. To my mind, as far as your earlier comment about Muslim Indians, India is a very big country. I'm afraid one can't quite generalize. I know an awful lot of Muslim Indians who wouldn't agree with that statement of Hanan's. But I'm sorry that even one Muslim feeling that way, to my mind, is sad. It shouldn't be the case. Everyone should feel, in a democracy particularly, they have the rights to express themselves and to defend themselves, organize themselves, and march forward. And many do. Millions do. We have 200 million Muslims in India. So it's not as if they can suddenly all feel disloyal or we wouldn't have a country left.
Dr. Tharoor, your comments sparked a whole new slew of commentary from our onstage audience, I can see, but I want to go to Anjali, Natalie, and Suleiman first. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to echo what Dr. Tharoor said. I've fought for a long time in my life to really stay true to my allegiance to India, which has been difficult because of how much time I've spent abroad. So while I'm Indian by passport, I've often struggled with the idea of being Indian by pedigree. I also want to say I do regrettably am also as pessimistic as you are, Dr. Hallaq, about the role of institutions within these states and how they prevent us from having that sense of belonging to our communities. I do think, though, a lot of what we've discussed today, a lot of the problems that we've discussed today within states is actually a problem of policy, which is different. I think a lot of times when certain people within the Indian state don't feel a sense of belonging, it's coming from a place of narrowly defined ideas of what it means to be an Indian. If you want to... And it cannot happen without a secular state. If India, as it's going now, decides to become a Hindu Rashtra or Hindu nation, then there's going to be even more alienation than what we feel today. But I do think a lot of the issues that you have brought up so far can be eliminated if policies have been changed to be more broad, to define what an Indian means in more broader terms and not narrow it down to, an Indian is mostly a Hindu because that's what the majority religion is. I personally relate a lot more to my Muslim Indian friends in Qatar. And I think the allegiance to community is not trumped by the allegiance to the nation for me personally, because it actually has diversified what community means for me. So, you can be an Indian Muslim Hana and I can be an Indian Hindu, but I would still connect with you far better than I would connect to a white German, because we still have that commonality between us.
That's right. I mean, the whole idea of Indian nationhood, you can be a proud Muslim, a proud Indian, a proud Bengali, a proud Keralite, a proud whatever, And all those identities are kept safe by this identity that the Indian state privileges and whose flag I wear proudly on my chest. It's simply a way of keeping all of these identities, that leaving you safe to be who you want to be within that larger identity.
Isn't that violated violently by the number of genocides against minorities around the world? I mean, you are giving me you are giving me an ideal picture of what the nation state does.
Ought to be.
Ought to, even that's worse. Ought to. Well, that's not enough. I think.
Well, nobody's perfect. We're all striving towards that, aren't we?
You are right, but I think we need to understand the ought is facing major challenges by the genocides, by the minorities, and the miserable experience they have in all around the world, not only in India. India is only doing what the modern nation state does. This is an important thing to do, to say. It's not only India. There is also China. There is also, and I can go for out of the 200 some countries in the world, I would say that probably even Bhutan, supposedly in our imagination, the place of tranquility and beauty and preservation of nature, actually it is suppressing an important minority there, even Bhutan. And so I would say, look at what the modern state does in terms of minorities and how pretty quickly the discrimination can turn into genocide. Every state is potentially genocidal. Another thing which is very important is that the modern state is not in the business of human flourishing in the way it has been defined by humanity until the modern state arose in the 17th, 18th century. The modern state does not care about ethics at all. It is, as an important philosopher said one day, the modern state is not in the business of making you good. That is an absolute truth. The modern state is in the business of strengthening itself. One of the things that it needs people like some of us here who are very enthusiastic about it and who are willing to go and die for it.
Tharoor, I want to go to you, though, because you've had your hand up for a while.
I would like to make two comments. First of all, when we say that we want a nation state, we have to acknowledge the fact that people will be excluded regardless. As a Libyan who's also a Maziri, when a nation state was formed, Arabic was the main language, but what was the result of that? The result of that was Amazirs, known as Berbers, were not allowed to speak Amazighi in public. They were alienated because they were not seen as part of the nation state. So who decides that I am a part of this nation state and not? Why does someone has the right to tell me that I belong or don't belong? So for years, Amazirs have been excluded under the Gaddafi's rule because he aimed to have a nation state unified in language, religion, and whatever. So what I want to say is a nation state is in fact genocidal and it will always exclude minorities. And we should not sacrifice minorities for the purpose of having a unified nation state. Another question that I would like to ask to Dr. Hallaq is, do you feel or see that in one future we will have kind of a stateless world?
Dr. Hallaq, before you answer, because there was two questions in there, right, and they were very sharp. Tharoor, I hear what you said. Who decides I belong or don't belong? And then a direct question, but I want to get a few more students in before we get that answer. If you can hold on to that answer. Anu, your hand was up.
So as a person from an African country, well, from multiple ones, there's a lot of ties to colonialism and how the states from like European, specifically British in my sense, arbitrarily like made these countries kind of these lands and split them up and gave ownership to these countries. How do you think, from your perspective, land ties to your view of the modern nation state?
Anu, thank you for that. Before we get an answer, and I'm writing it down so we don't forget, how does it tie to land? I'd like to hear from Hannah and Tafsia.
So I would like to thank Dr. Tharoor for his kind diplomatic apology, but I believe we all deserve more than that. And so firstly, it's a very nice idea to say civic nationalism, unity and diversity. It's very, very flowery and butterflies. But while you also mentioned that one of the colonels in the armed attack that was perpetrated on Pakistan was Muslim, and you said it as a justification that we're all in this together, and you are inherently assuming by that comment that the 1.3 billion population of India are on board with that attack that happened on Pakistan. And you also assume that if someone had to ask for an anti-war, for someone to ask for a independent fact-checking investigation on what exactly happened in Pahalgam, that would be inherently anti-state. And that would be also called sedition. And I might also return to India and have a draconian law imposed on me and put into jail without trial. And that is what I think Wael Hallaq says, that the nation state is inherently violent. It exists to subjugate, and I haven't felt anything but subjugation under the unity of diversity slogan that we often say that we live by. And I would like to also mention Anjali's comment. As opposed to seeing Anjali as a fellow Indian citizen, Anjali has lived abroad as well most of her life. I would like to say that I see Anjali as a global citizen. I see her as a human, and I see her as a sister more than I see her as an Indian citizen. And that's how I ultimately prefer saying everyone in this room today.
So I'm going to let you tackle which one you want to tackle, Dr.
Let's
Hallaq.
start with this one. It's you put your hand on one of the most important factors for the ambitions of the modern state, which is intrinsically colonialist. Another thing, modern state is intrinsically colonialist. Europe created the modern state out of colonialism, and colonialism created the state in the rest of the world. And the first thing the state wants its power. It's either by recruiting and conscripting the population to build the economic power and the military power of the state, or taking the lands of other people. Now, there are two kinds of populations insofar as the modern state is concerned. It's either a population that can be converted, literally converted, meaning making them part of us. In other words, we're talking about the inclusiveness that my two good colleagues were mentioning. Or if they are not convertible, like the Palestinians insofar as Israel's Zionist ideology is concerned, nobody is convertible, especially the Palestinians. They will never become Jewish what's the solution? Genocide. It worked from the end of the 19th century until now. And I must remind everybody here that the genocide is the work of the modern state because it's also modern. There were no genocides before the end of the 19th century.
All right, I'm going to try to come back
Dr. Tharoor.
on this because I simply, though you've typecast me as a realist in this discussion, I don't believe that the nation state is incompatible with idealism. As you rightly said, we all have multiple identities. I have a shared identity with Hanan as an Indian. I have a shared identity with Will as a man. I mean, you can have identities across various things. Religion can be an identifying factor. But at the end of the day, the state is not compatible with the common humanity. I spent 29 years serving our common humanity without ever losing my nationality. In fact, the UN required to know my nationality, my passport, my identity in that purpose. But in the course of my work, my nationality didn't define me. So all of these things mean that you can rise above any narrow identity when you subsume it into something else. Ideally, the kind of nation state I believe in, and that's what I believe aspirationally India seeks to be, is one in which all identities are safe, in which everyone is able to pursue their dreams, and at the same time, which, yes, safeguards a certain amount of space for itself, does have a certain amount of power in order to regulate the lives of its residents, does have common interests and allegiances, including for territory. Territorial integrity is also a part of state sovereignty and becomes an issue. And yes, that's one. There are clashes with other states that lay claim on your territory and you lay claim on theirs, and this becomes an issue. Granted. But I mean, it doesn't take me as an idealist to say that I'm prepared to surrender my self-respect when it comes to what I cherish as being my homeland. Just as in your own home, You as a Palestinian may have every right to feel violated if your ancestors' homes were taken away from them on the grounds of ethnicity. The same sort of argument would apply when a state says, why should another state come and take what is my territory and I'm allowed to defend it? To my mind, you can't reduce states only to what they do when they're faced with that kind of challenge or conflict. States can serve common purposes with other states, whether it's in the European Union, whether it's in the United Nations, whether it's in other collective entities. We have lots and lots of problems that my old boss Kofi Annan called problems without passports, problems that cross all frontiers. And where state boundaries, I mean, you can't fence off your environment. We all share that. So there our common humanity comes into play. And states have to work together, bring their own strengths to the table to tackle something like the environmental problems. So these are all issues, it seems to me, that are not incompatible with the realism I've expressed, and at the same time with the idealism that this young lady has expressed. We must see each other as human beings.
So I'm wondering, what's at stake if we continue to rely on a nation state as a political idea? Very briefly, how would you answer that, Dr. Engels?
It's the organization of a functioning society, and the question what would be the alternative. And I think that for the moment the only alternatives I can see is for the European context is either fragmentation, and we already have a lot of nation states that are the brink of fragmenting. Think about the UK with Scotland, think about Spain with the Catalans and so on, or the Bretons or the people from Corsica. So fragmentation is one alternative. The other alternative basically would be a pan-European cooperation in order to form something that would be broadly in competition with the others and that could survive. I think that is at stake as the alternatives. And I think the nation state in itself is probably one way or the other outdated by the sense that history is taken. And from a paradoxical point of view, those who would like to save and to conserve and to protect the nation states would have to create a civilizational structure where this nation state could survive.
Dr. Tharoor, your final answer.
Well, my answer is where we began, civic nationalism. That is a nation state that actually accommodates diversity. That is not just a place where you have to belong to one ethnicity, one language, one religion, one whatever, but rather that as long as you subscribe to the Constitution and to the institutions underpinning it, you serve, you flourish, and you belong to it. So the sense of belonging, to my mind, that is attached to a nation state, that's what I cherish. It's not narrow versions of identity.
And yet, Dr. Tharoor, if I may, we heard the disagreement here. So then what's at stake if there are those who do not believe that?
They always have the right to opt out, right? Go emigrate to another place if you really don't believe in this project. To my mind, if I were in that position, I would want to fight to make it better. I would use my rights under the Constitution to demand what I'm entitled to.
Dr. Hallaq?
I would say that the stakes are extremely high to such a level that it is a matter of, for us, life and death, because we spent lots of time speaking about belonging, which is okay, but that's not the whole game. The state is responsible for the regulation of the corporation. The state is responsible for the control of science and intellectual production. I am all for business and building capital, but the corporations, modern corporations, have been totally destructive of everything because all they care about is money, but we care about more. You, I, as average people, we care about environment, about this beautiful planet. We care about our mental health. We care about communities and families. So all of this is important. This is not just about belonging. And the belonging, by the way, is the narrative is, I must admit also, Dr. Tharoor, that it is pleasantly optimistic, but not realistic. The last remark I have is this. I think that too much is assumed and taken for granted and not thought about. The young people, your generation, our generation is hopeless. You should forget about us. Your generation, you guys have
This is the world is your world, not ours. When you need to find it in a reasonable shape by the time you hit my age. This is why it's your responsibility. It's a matter of life and death, in my opinion, that you should take interest in rethinking the state. What we now lack is that there is no balance. We are only in politics. We need something to counter this kind of an antidote. And the antidote is exactly what you need to be thinking about. It could take any form. Maybe something was not mentioned tonight at all. But the fact is that you have to pursue this. It's your duty. In fact, in general terms, religious duty to do this.
But what is your alternative?
Sorry?
What is your alternative?
What's happening here in Bradford is unlike anything that I have seen in a very long time. And so I thank all of you for being part of this. I want to end with just 10 seconds, each guest, 10 seconds with what you took away from our conversations with the students and young adults, because that is what elevated this conversation to a level that I have yet to see in a long time.
We are all asking the same question. We are all trying to define solidarity, civilization, belonging, nation in a way that is very similar, or rather, even if we disagree on many things, the fact to develop these different positions does not belong just to one civilization, but finally to all civilizations. So we are joined in this together in this huge discussion, and I like that very much.
Dr. Tharoor, 10 seconds. What do you take away?
I'm very happy with everything David said. I could endorse that. But let me also add that there have been a lot of questions, a lot of challenges, some idealism, some fundamental troubles in their minds about the nation state. But I haven't heard one alternative, not even from Wael. If you don't have the nation state, how are we going to live? How are we going to organize ourselves? Who's going to govern us? Who decides? Somebody will have power. Who's going to decide who has that power? And in the absence of an alternative, let's make the best of what we've got. What we've got is a nation state. Let's try and make it better.
Amen to that. I agree with this last part. In the 1980s and 90s...
Your takeaway. This is why I love sitting with professors. I love it. But a 10-second takeaway.
10 seconds. Mm-hmm. In the 1980s and 90s, I had to struggle with my students even to make them think about the state. It was not discussed except by literally, you can count them on two hands in the world who got interested in the study of the state as a critique. I am just extremely, extremely delighted that now we could discuss it in a forum like this. This is a huge difference between the 80s and 90s, and I am thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of this Doha Debates Town Hall. We would like to thank our partner and host, Bradford Literature Festival, and thank you to Qatar Foundation for bringing us all together. Of course, this majlis would not be possible without you, our audience here in Bradford and our viewers around the world. We sought out truth and understanding. We heard powerful ideas, sharp arguments, personal reflections, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. It is now your turn. What does national identity mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going. And thank you once again.